Still, we hope for something more, a break in the ordinary, an infusion of the unexpected, an explosion of glory, a miracle, revealing more than we hope to understand. Let's have this side of the congregation do the bold words, and this side of the congregation will respond in the italics. Seasons of the self. We need a celebration that speaks the spring-inspired word about life and death. Through all the cycling seasons, days, and years. We need a sense of dignity to wrap our own heart around December rust. And push life out of inner tombs and outer pain. Unless we move the seasons of self and spring can come for us. The winter will go on and on. And Easter will begin with it, and life will never come again, despite the fact of spring. This morning, I invite you to light silent candles of joy or sorrow at any time during the service at this table to the right of the pulpit. There is a journal there to record your thoughts and prayers. And spoken candles will be resurrected next week. Now we join together in the spirit of prayer. After our spoken prayer and a time of silent meditation, we'll sing together, Spirit of Life. Spirit of life, be with us this morning with all that we carry, joys and sorrows, hopes and doubts, accomplishments and failures. Be with us as we open our hearts to the joy of Easter and to the hope that this season brings. Spirit of new life, help us to welcome the blooming of spring into our lives. Help us to welcome new beginnings, risks, and the unknown. Spirit of compassion, help us to be gentle with each other and with ourselves. Help us to forgive and to love more deeply. Spirit of memory, be with us as we hold dearly thoughts of those who are no longer with us. Help us to heal from our many losses and to balance remembering with letting go. Spirit of resurrection, be with us as we roll back the stones of fear, hatred, and indifference to welcome a world of peace. Help us to work for tolerance, justice, and solidarity. Spirit of community, be with us this Easter morning as we worship together in honor of stories of rebirth and in celebration of renewed life. Amen.
Our first reading is called Solvents by the Reverend Robbie Walsh. They've discovered that Michelangelo originally painted the Sistine Chapel in bright colors, and some people are upset about it. When we visited the Vatican, they were about 3/4 through with the big cleaning job on the ceiling. The restorers were working from a bridge-like scaffold designed much like Michelangelo's, using the same mounting holes in the walls. As the cleaning was done, the scaffold moved down the length of the ceiling. The movement was in reverse primordial time, starting with the flood and moving towards the creation. Someone said the scaffold was like a very slow windshield wiper. In front of it, the frescoes were dull and gloomy. Behind it, they were clear and bold. We were the first people in several centuries to see those bright colors. The almost touching fingers of God and Adam were just visible on the clear sky of the scaffold. It looked wonderful. There were art critics who claimed that Michelangelo was a gloomy fellow who deliberately added a layer of dullness over the bright paints after the plaster dried. In their view, the solvents are removing not only soot and smoke, but part of the original artwork. So we are now seeing colors the artist did not intend us to see. Well, maybe he wasn't so gloomy. I'm no expert, but I prefer the new Michelangelo. It is officially spring now. Here and there, we see a drop of primary color in the gray timescape. A cardinal, a crocus, a momentary flood of bright light. Soon the sun will drive the dullness away, and the greenness and the blueness and the yellowness of the earth and sky will spread out all around us. I wonder if I am ready for spring within myself. I think I have some residue to clean away, deposited by the candles burned through the long nights. And I think I know what the solvents are. Sunlight, children, music, prayer, true meetings with people, and hands to hold.
All of them were written many, many decades after the historical time period anyway. And there are many of them even within the canonical Gospels. Yes, more than one story. The Easter story, as it's told in the Gospel of John, revolves around the experience of one person, Mary Magdalene. It's Mary who gets up before dawn on the day after the Jewish Sabbath and goes alone to visit the tomb. Her beloved teacher has died a horrible death, and it was only by the unexpected generosity of a wealthy man that Jesus was given even the small dignity of a real burial place instead of a pauper's grave. Because of the Sabbath, his body had not been cleaned according to tradition, and Mary set out early with her herbs in order to do this last grieving service. But when she got to the tomb, she found that the stone blocking its entrance had already been rolled away, and his body was gone. It isn't hard to imagine her despair and her anger to be robbed of even this last farewell. She ran to the others with the news, and they followed her back to see for themselves. Sure enough, the stone was rolled away and the body gone. They probably stood there arguing for a while about what to do, but there was nothing to be done. Who would you complain to when it risked your life even to admit that you had known him? Filled with that bitter realization, they finally left again. But Mary stayed, alone and weeping, maybe something defiant creeping in with the grief to make her brave enough to stay. And then she caught a movement out of the corner of her eye and turned to find someone standing there. "Why are you crying?" he asked. "Who are you looking for?" Thinking he must be the gardener and that surely he must know something, that he was perhaps even mocking her with the questions, she said, as carefully as she could, "Sir, if you have carried him away, tell me where you've put him, and I'll take care of it. I won't tell anyone. I'll just take his body and clean him up so he can rest in peace, please." Then Jesus said, because of course in this story it was Jesus standing there and she hadn't recognized him, Jesus just said her own name to her, Mary. And then she knew, and she said back to him, Rabbi, which means teacher. For those of us who believe that Jesus was a human being like us, the idea of his literal resurrection from death is a leap of faith we can't quite make. We know that when our bodies die, they die. We belong to the earth, and it is comforting and right to know that we dissolve again into the earth's sweetness. But perhaps we can believe in Mary's resurrection. When Mary heard her name called, suddenly her eyes were opened to a new reality. She was called out from the blindness of her grief and despair. And from within herself, she found a new way to see and to understand what had happened to her. Reverend Kathleen McTighe says that this Easter story is to be understood as a truth. It points to the moments that arrive in every life when something within us is called out, called forth, called to a deeper understanding of our world. Easter lifts up this question. In this bright opening of the earth, in this turning season when new life is pouring out all around us, what will we bring forth from within ourselves? The message of our faith is that we have a part in how the story unfolds. We listen for what is calling to us, and like Mary, when we hear our name, we answer, rising again to meet the life that will not stop calling our names.
Our faith is deeply rooted in Christian teachings and traditions, but many of us do not feel a connection with the particulars of the crucifixion and resurrection stories as they are told in the Bible. Many carry wounds from encounters with traditional forms of Christianity. But does this mean that we should throw out the whole story of Jesus' resurrection? I feel like that would be a real loss. There is so much in this ancient story to keep. Mary's own resurrection, for instance, and the idea that we are called over and over again to rise and meet the life that will not stop calling our names. And our own resurrections, at those points in our lives when life as we know it ends, but when somehow we find within ourselves a will to go on in a new way. Call it resurrection, call it resilience, call it the spring within ourselves, call it hope. There is something in that ancient story to keep, to learn from. It's no coincidence that we celebrate the truth of resurrection in the spring of the year, when all around us the earth is being called back to life. Green shoots make their way out of hard, cold earth. Spots of color return to the gray landscape. And within ourselves, we feel a stirring of energy being born, calling us to go outside, to relax our bodies grown stiff through a winter of tensing against the cold. But it is not only in the springtime of the year that we are called to resurrect ourselves. Each time we respond to grief and loss and heartache, with a will to go on living, we are resurrecting ourselves. Each time we get up in the morning when we would rather cocoon ourselves in sadness and wallow in disappointment, we are resurrecting ourselves. And so it is this resiliency, too, that I choose to celebrate on Easter. This deep truth of being called to life, of bringing forth from within ourselves strength, resilience, and hope, when we could more easily stay in a tomb of despair. If we haven't already, at some point in our lives, we may find that the life we have been living is over. We may suffer a loss or betrayal or illness that causes our world to come crumbling down. But that does not mean the end for us. It means that there is a new life to begin if we can only believe in resurrection, in returning to life. When Elizabeth Edwards learned of her husband's affair, it was in the limelight of public scrutiny. John Edwards, former U.S. Senator and the 2004 Democratic vice presidential nominee, had been unfaithful. Later it came to light that he even had a child with his mistress. Faced with this humiliation and the disillusion of the trust her marriage was built on, Elizabeth had a choice: curl up in despair or move on. To make things even worse, Elizabeth learned at roughly the same time that her cancer had returned. Life, as she knew it, had ended. But this was not the first time that Elizabeth Edwards had faced the end of the life she had been living. In 1996, the Edwards' 16-year-old son, Wade, was killed in a car accident. That was the first time Elizabeth was faced with the choice to stay in the tomb of despair or to allow a slow and winding resurrection of spirit to bring her back to life again, a new life, one without her son Wade in it. It was more than symbolic when Elizabeth and Edward cast their lot with life by literally bringing new life into the world. Elizabeth underwent fertility treatment and at the age of 48 and then 50 had 2 more children, Emma Claire and Jack. There's nothing like a crying baby to recall you to the present and to living. And yet this newly built life too would come for an end for Elizabeth with the news of her husband's infidelity, and then the diagnosis of breast cancer, its treatment and return. With each loss came the mourning of a life once lived. And after mourning each loss, Elizabeth fought to find within herself the inner wellspring of hope and courage to return to life, to go on with the new life within her. She writes, "We cannot turn back. This is the life we have now, and the only way to find peace, the only way to be resilient when these landmines explode beneath your foundation, is to first accept that there is a new reality. There is loss, there is heartache, there is an end, but there is also new beginning. There is also new life." Each time I fell into a chasm, she said, my son's death or a tumor or an unwelcome woman in my life, I had to accept that the planet had taken a few turns, and I could not turn it back. My life was and would always be different. But each time there was a new life, a new story. Telling and retelling the story of the resurrection reminds us that there can be new life, new stories. And that although there is mystery and miracle involved, we have a role to play in authoring what that new story will be. What Elizabeth Edwards devoted herself to at the end of her life was being there for her children, keeping her son's memory alive, and writing one last book, which she entitled Resilience. In the book Resilience, Elizabeth says that the ability to look forward after a setback is a gift, but it is also a learned skill. She learned it in part from her father, who, after suffering a massive stroke, was pronounced brain dead, but then went on to live 18 years, relearning how to walk, how to speak, and even how to dance. Resurrection. I have used my father's strength or my mother's grace as she stood beside him as a touchstone, said Elizabeth. And I suspect that we each have someone like him, someone whose personal courage in the face of impossible odds inspires us to do something we thought we could not do, who reminds us that what seems like a mountain in front of us can, in fact, be climbed. My father was an imperfect man in many ways, she said. But maybe it was better that he was imperfect and that I knew he was, for I learned that perfection was not a requirement of resilience. Unitarian minister Reverend David Blanchard writes, "At Easter, I find plenty of cause to celebrate. Not the heroic in God, though. After all, how hard can it be for God to be a hero? But I do celebrate the heroic possibilities that I have witnessed in the human souls, when through resurrection of our own fashioning we rise to hope, rise to love, rise to heal, rise to forgive, rise to courage, rise to foolishness, rise to wisdom, rise even to die, but most essentially to rise to life. Not to die a hero, but to live as one. May we rise to life. May we rise to life. May we find the solvents that will help us to clear away the gloom and despair. May we rise again and again to meet the life that will not stop calling our names. May we continue to tell and to live the stories of resurrection. Amen, and blessed be.
My Lord, what a glory! Oh, my Lord, what a glory! Oh, my Lord, stars begin to fall. Oh, my Lord, what a morning. Oh, my Lord, what a morning. Oh, my Lord, what a morning. When the stars begin to fall, you'll hear the trumpet sound to wake the nations underground. Look into my Lord's bright eye. When the stars begin to fall, oh, my Lord, what a morning. Oh, my Lord, what a morning. Oh, my Lord, what a morning. When the stars begin to fall, when the stars begin to fall.
Our last reading this morning is "A Tomb is No Place to Stay" by Reverend Richard Gilbert. A tomb is no place to stay, be it a cave in the Judean hills or the dark cavern of the spirit. A tomb is no place to stay. When fresh grass rolls away the stone of winter cold, and valiant flowers burst their way to warmth and light. A tomb is no place to stay. When each morning announces our reprieve, and we know we are granted yet another day of living. A tomb is no place to stay. When life laughs a welcome to hearts that have been away too long.